And so part of that Safety of the Model Advocacy Institute is we train them to train the model into child welfare and also into their own agencies, because the truth is sometimes co-located advocates are often feeling isolated in their own agencies. And their own agencies often don't understand what the mission is, and there's a history of tension between the advocates and child welfare. And so we talked about how to use the model to train into advocacy, their own agencies, and build relationships and capacity there. One of my favorite stories out of this was, I think it was here in Florida, where one of the advocates was training her colleagues around using a perpetrator pattern-based approach and saying that domestic violence perpetrators is a parenting choice. And then what she came back and told us was that she taught this to her colleagues, and one of the colleagues was running a group for domestic violence involved, child welfare involved domestic violence survivors. And what I recollect, and maybe Heidi and Bridget have an additional piece of this, was that the first group, and the facilitators asking the women to talk about why they're there. You go around, you can imagine the guilt, the shame, anger, you know, why am I here? Just a lot of negative emotion, a lot of heaviness. And then the facilitator says, we're going to go around again and we're going to check in one more time. But this time the question I want you to answer is, tell me about your partner's parenting. And I want you to hear, and again, connect this, and I couldn't leave without doing this one more time, that just by asking the question, you're doing something like this. Does that make sense? Because otherwise he's invisible. And I think like today, in Kathy and Casey's story, Roger was an invisible presence. He wasn't on the stage, but everything they talked about related to his choices, his behavior, those dilemmas, the parentification, the way Casey didn't know whether to come in the room or not, Kathy's challenges, all that was created by Roger's violence. And they were all on some level parenting choices. And they're all the ways he was being a bad parent. And so by just asking that question in that group and saying to these women, tell me about your partner's parenting choices, their partners were brought into the room, and their responsibility came with it in some level, in the sense that they had some role, because the facilitator was asking the question. Imagine if all that in the group was about, Mom, what do you do? What could you do? How can we support you? All great questions. But if you didn't ask that question about, tell me about his parenting. So CPIs and investigators and assessment workers can think about this. When you ask mothers, even if you don't meet the perpetrator, tell me about your partner's parenting, you're doing something like this. You're equaling it out. You're kind of changing the paradigm a little bit.